Hello, my name is Faith Phillips, and I'm the Director of Student Financial Services at Ohio State Newark and Central Ohio Technical College. And this presentation is about the 2023-2024 financial aid process. We will begin by talking about the FAFSA form. The key word in FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, is free. It is a free application to apply for all federal and state financial assistance. There are websites at which a student can get help submitting the FAFSA form for a fee, but these sites are not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. Department of Education. Families should not pay for assistance that is provided for free by ED's websites or by a local college or institution. And we will speak in this presentation about the studentaid.gov website, which is the free website for completing the FAFSA form. The FAFSA form is the application for all federal grants, work study, and federal student loans, as well as state of Ohio grants, and for some schools, institutional scholarships and grants. Families will provide demographic information, taxable and untaxable income for 2021, as well as assets. Students should submit the FAFSA regardless of family income. All families, regardless of income, at the very minimum, will be eligible for a federal student loan. But we want families to submit the FAFSA form because income is not only the factor in determining eligibility, and some institutions require a FAFSA to be on file to determine a student's eligibility for institutional grants. And the student does not want to miss out on those opportunities simply because they chose not to file the FAFSA form, thinking that they would not be eligible for scholarships or grants. The 23-24 FAFSA form is the application that students will be completing for enrollment beginning with fall of 2023. This application will be available starting October 1st. Students should submit the FAFSA as early as possible after October 1st, but by the school's priority deadline that may be set. To find out when the school's financial aid priority deadline is, students should be reaching out to either their admissions office that they are working with, or by calling the financial aid office or checking the school's financial aid website and looking for a financial aid priority date or priority deadline. That is the date that schools would prefer that a student has their FAFSA submitted by. By meeting that date, students will receive their financial aid offers as soon as possible so that they can make a comparison between all of their financial aid offers while they're trying to make a decision on which school to attend. Also, by meeting that priority date, students may maximize their aid eligibility. Some schools have smaller funds of money that they tend to award to the students who meet those priority dates. A student does not have to be admitted to a college to add it to the FAFSA form. However, most colleges will not bring in the FAFSA form until it does have an admissions application to match up to it. And students must reapply or submit the FAFSA each year after October 1st. The expected family contribution is calculated results of the FAFSA form. So it is the results from the information that is provided on the FAFSA form. So we'll talk a little bit in this presentation about the EFC, or the expected family contribution. It is the index number that is used by colleges to determine how much aid the student is eligible for and from what funds. It is calculated using a formula established by federal law. And the same figure that a student is calculated, their EFC, is reported to all colleges and universities. So if a student's EFC is 5,000, that is the same EFC that is reported to all colleges and universities. So what does change is the different tuition rates at each of those institutions. What doesn't change is the family's ability to pay. The EFC is not the amount of money that the student owes to the college. And factors that determine the EFC are both the student and parent taxable and untaxable income, their cash savings checking account balances, their assets, as well as the household size of the student and parent, and the number in college. We encourage all families to submit the FAFSA form by using the FAFSA on the web at studentaid.gov. The FAFSA on the web has edits built into it to help a family present from making mistakes. such as if you were to plug in the student's date of birth as July 15th of 22, it knows that that's not a logical response and will pop up an error and ask the student to correct that. It also has skip logic built into it that allows a student and a parent to skip unnecessary questions based on how they've answered one question. They may not have to answer the next question. You also have the option within the FAFSA on the web to use the IRS data retrieval tool to import tax data. And we'll talk a little bit more about the IRS data retrieval tool a little bit further in this presentation. FAFSA is definitely, when you do it online, is a more timely submission for that process. Detailed instructions are provided on each question. There's a circle with a question mark inside it. You click on that and that will pop up more details regarding the question and what they are seeking there, as well as a simplified process in future years. So remembering that you need to reapply for financial aid each year, you will be able to use what we call a renewal FAFSA. So next year, the student will log in and identify themselves, and the FAFSA will pre-populate with all the demographic information that typically does not change. It can be corrected and changed at that time, but then the student and parent would update the FAFSA form with the current tax year information that is being asked and assets at that time. We encourage all families to request what we call a federal student aid ID, or the FSA ID. This is the username and password that becomes the electronic signature for the FAFSA form. You can apply for the FSA ID by going to studentaid.gov and create an FSA ID account. When creating this account, you are encouraged to write down all the things that are associated with the FSA ID. You will want to create the FSA ID before you begin the FAFSA. FSA IDs are not year specific, so families can create the FSA IDs prior to October 1st. You will need the Social Security number of the student and at least one parent whose information will be provided on the FAFSA form. And you will need a mobile phone number and an email address, 2 different numbers and email addresses for both the student and the parent. When creating the FSA ID for the first time, you must use what is called a multi-factor authentication, the MFA. You will use this MFA one-time code by using either an email, a text, or you may download the Authenticator app. When the FSA ID is created, you will also be presented with a one-use backup code. When that backup code pops up on your screen, write that code down. You will only be presented with it once and will not see it again. That backup code is used to access the account if you cannot use the multi-factor authentication to get into the system. Once used, the MFA is disabled. Once you use that backup code, MFA is disabled, and you will need to re-enable it in your account settings. So if anytime you are logged out of your FSA ID and you cannot log back in using the MFA or the backup code, you would want to call FSA for assistance at this 800 number. Tips for creating the FSA ID. First of all, the student needs their own FSA ID. So if you have multiple children in school at the same time, they each need their own FAFSA form, and they each will need their own FSA ID. So you will apply for an FSA ID for every student that you will have in school once they are enrolling in college. You will only need an FSA ID for one parent whose information is going on the FAFSA form. So assuming that the student is providing information for 2 parents, only one of those parents will need to sign the FAFSA form, meaning they only need one FSA ID. You can only use a phone number and an email one time and associate it with one FSA ID. Do not use the student's high school email account, since those accounts tend to be deactivated when the student graduates from high school. FSA IDs should not be shared. So students should create their own FSA ID and a parent creates their own FSA ID. Now we're going to move into talking about the FAFSA form on studentaid.gov. So you will go to studentaid.gov, go under apply for aid and click the link that says complete the FAFSA form. When you're logging in for the very first time, you will click Start Here, and using the student's FSA ID, identify the student. You can save the FAFSA as you go through the process, and you do not need to complete the FAFSA in one sitting. If you leave the FAFSA, when you do come back in, the next time you will click the login. Once you have logged into the FAFSA form, it will ask you to tell us about yourself. And in most cases, you will click the link, I am the student, and want to access the FAFSA form. On October 1st, you will see two FAFSA years presented to the student, the 2023-24 and the 2022-23 FAFSA form. Please make sure that for seniors in high school, you are completing the 23-24 FAFSA form. This is for enrollment, again, starting in the fall of 23. The 22-23 FAFSA form is for students who are currently enrolled in college and or who might be planning to enroll in the spring of 23. You will see when you are answering the FAFSA questions, the tabs at the top, they will turn from gray or blue to green as you progress through the questions. If you need to go back to a prior section, you can either use the previous button at the bottom of the screen, or you can tap on the tab that you would like to go back to. Do not use the back arrow button, only use the previous and continue buttons. And as mentioned, the application does auto-save as you move through the process. Once you have identified the student's demographic information, you will now come to the school selection setup, where you will be telling the FAFSA where you wanted it to be sent. You may select up to 10 colleges and universities on the first submission of the FAFSA form. So if the student is looking at more than 10 colleges and universities, you will want to select the 10 that have the earliest financial aid priority date and submit them on the first transaction of the FAFSA form. Once the FAFSA is processed, which usually takes about 48 to 72 hours, the student may log back in, go to the school selection section of the FAFSA, and they may add up to 10 more colleges and universities and submit that FAFSA. It does not matter what order you list the schools on the FAFSA form. When the FAFSA is received by each college, we do not see what other colleges the FAFSA has been sent to. And if a student does go in to add 10 more colleges or to add more colleges beyond the 10, they will need to remove a college in order to add another one. But that does not notify the college that is removed that they have been removed from the FAFSA form. Each time a FAFSA is submitted, it creates a new transaction. You may search the school selection area by just selecting the state where the school is located, or you may type in the name of the city or the name of the school to narrow down your search. Once you've selected the schools, you will see them over here on the right-hand side. For each school that is listed, you will need to indicate a housing plan. The options are on campus, off campus, or with parent. So the student may have different housing plans for each college that they have listed here. If you've made an error and did not mean to have that college listed, you can go over here and remove them from the school selection area. If you want to put the schools in a specific order, you may do that over here by moving the arrows and moving the schools through the order that you want them. Be careful with schools that have regional or extended campuses, and make sure that when you select the school that you're selecting the proper campus. Some schools have one location where the FAFSA is submitted. So for Ohio State, for example, it's all campuses, but for another college, you may see that you need to actually select the regional campus that the student intends to enroll. The next set of questions on the FAFSA form are related to the dependency status of the student. So it is determining whether the student is required to provide parental information on the FAFSA form. If a student answers no to all of the questions presented, the student is considered dependent, and the FAFSA will be expecting the student to provide parent information. If a student answers yes to any of the questions, it will indicate that the student is independent and parent information should not be provided. The questions that are related to dependency status are marital status. So if a student is married, they are independent. Does the student have dependent children of their own that they provide more than 50% support for, or other dependents that they support? Are they currently on active duty, a veteran of the armed forces? Are they a ward of the court or in foster care, an emancipated minor, in illegal guardianship, or homeless or self-supporting and at risk for homelessness? Any yes to any of these questions will automatically make the student independent and will not be required to report parents' information. When a student does say no to all of those questions, it will tell the student then that they have been determined to be dependent, and it means that parents' information must be provided. The student has two choices at this time: to indicate that they will provide information about their parents and move on through the FAFSA, or they may click the button that says, I'm unable to provide information about my parents. So if a student has an extenuating circumstance that is preventing them from being able to provide parents information, and it was not addressed in the dependency determination questions, the student may say, I am unable to provide information about my parents. And it will tell them that they may move forward. They will be not considered dependent or independent, and they will not have a calculated EFC. Once the school receives that FAFSA form where the student has indicated that they're unable to provide parents information, the school's financial aid office will reach out to the student to discuss their special circumstances. The student will then provide an explanation to the college and provide documentation to support their circumstances. And if the college feels that it is warranted, then the college may override the student's status and make them independent. Circumstances in which a school may do that are when the student indicates that both parents are incarcerated, the student left home due to an abusive environment, or that they are estranged from their parent, or that they simply do not know where their parents are and they're unable to contact them. Circumstances that do not warrant a dependency override are simply the student does not live with the parents, or the parents do not provide financial support to the student. Parent refuses to contribute to the college expenses, or they refuse to complete the FAFSA form, or the parents simply do not claim the student as a dependent on their tax return. Those do not make a student independent. So if a student is in an unusual circumstance, they may move forward through the FAFSA without providing parents information, but they will need to follow up and work with the school's financial aid office to discuss a dependency override. So assuming that the student is dependent, who is the parent for the purposes of the FAFSA form? And it is only the biological or adoptive parents that may submit the FAFSA form. If the parents are not married, but they are living together, the student would report the information for both parents. If biological or adoptive parents are divorced or have never been married, the student would provide information for the parent that the student lived with most during the last 12 months. If the student lives equally with their parents, they would provide information about the parent who provided the most financial support over the last 12 months. If that parent is remarried, the step parent or the parent spouse becomes the other parent for the purposes of the FAFSA form and would be required to include their information as well. So when you are in the parent section, it refers to them as first parent and other parent. And if the student indicated that the parent is not married, then it would only be asking for information for the first parent. Then it will ask about the household size. So it will know automatically that there is at least one for the student that is applying for aid. And then it will add in the number of parents that the student indicated. And then it will ask, how many other dependents do your parents have? Include your parents' other dependents if they now live with your parents, currently receive more than half of their support from the parents, and will continue to receive that support. They would also include their other dependent children if they rely on them for more than half of their support, or could answer no to every one of the dependency status questions. So the FAFSA will add together all of the household and determine the student's household size. Then it will ask the student, of the people in your household size, what is the number in college? And at the very minimum, it must be one, and that is the student that this family is submitting the FAFSA for. If any of the other children or dependents of the parents are in college, they may also be included in the number in college. However, parents who are enrolled in college are not included in the number in college. The income information that you are reporting on the 23-24 FAFSA form will be for the 21 tax year. Families have the option to use what is called the IRS data retrieval tool that allows for certain tax information to be transferred from the IRS database directly onto the FAFSA form. Families may use data retrieval voluntarily, and the IRS will authenticate the taxpayer's identity when they choose to use the data retrieval tool. And if a tax record is found, IRS will then transfer the information and populate the FAFSA. Doing the data retrieval is voluntary. However, it is encouraged for a couple of reasons. One, it helps you prevent from making data entry errors and pulling over information off of your tax form that may not be from the proper line. And it also reduces the number of documents that the family may have to provide to the financial aid office. When FAFSAs are received by the financial aid office, some of them are selected for a process called verification. It is a random selection of FAFSAs by federal student aid for financial aid offices to verify that families filed the form properly. If a student is selected for verification and did not use the data retrieval tool, they would be asked then to provide a copy of the 2021 tax return. So by doing data retrieval tool successfully, that is one less document that the family would have to provide to the financial aid office. There are certain tax filers who are unable to use data retrieval. The common one are the parents that file married but separate. The IRS data retrieval tool is unable to add all of the tax information together and put it onto the FAFSA form as directed. There are questions that will be presented to the parent and student if they want to try to use the data retrieval tool, and based on how they answer those questions will determine if they're eligible to use the tool. So remember, the 23-24 FAFSA form is looking for the 2021 tax information. So if a family wants to, and this is presented to both the parent that indicates that they already completed a tax return, and then in the income section for the student, it is asked the same question. If they indicate that they completed a 2021 tax return, they too may use the data retrieval tool. They will give the student the option, or the parent the option, to use the data retrieval tool. You will tell which parent you are that is using it. So you want to select the parent that has the FSA ID, and then you will add in the parent's username and password. This is that authentication that gives permission from the FAFSA to IRS to use the data retrieval tool. And then you would click continue. Now, when that information is transferred back to the FAFSA form, it will be blocked out so that families cannot see the figures that were brought over. Each of those answers on the FAFSA will now say transferred from IRS. If a family chooses not to use the data retrieval tool, or they are ineligible to use the data retrieval tool, they will then move forward through the FAFSA form and answer each of the questions as presented. So it will ask for the income earned from work from the parents and the student if they worked. They will ask for additional IRS information, their income taxes paid, and then they will ask about other taxable income and untaxable income. Again, the student is asked the same questions in the student financial section. Then it will present the student and parent with questions regarding their assets. The assets are as of the date that they are submitting the FAFSA form. So remember, taxable and untaxable income is coming from 2021. The assets are as of the date that the student and parent are signing the FAFSA form. So we'll ask them, as of today, what is your parents' total current balance of cash savings and checking accounts? It asks the same question for the student. Then it will ask for the net worth of investments, including real estate, not the parent's home. And then it will ask for the net worth of the parents and the students' current business and or investment farms, but you do not include family farms or family businesses with 100 or fewer full-time employees. Assets that are included are real estate other than the home that the family lives in, any rental property, trust funds, UGMA, UTMA, money market, mutual fund, stocks, bonds, certificates of deposits, treasury bonds, other securities, and commodities, as well as qualified education savings plans, such as the 529 or the Coverdell savings plan. You include the value of all plans that the parent owns. So for example, if the parents are married and they each own a 529 for 2 children, you will report the value of all 529 plans, even if the second student may still be in either elementary or they're not in college yet. So they're still in, school, but not going to college. You still include the value of all 529 plans that the parent owns, and they are listed as an asset under the parent. Now, if the parent does not own the asset, or the divorced parents, the parent that is providing the information on the FAFSA does not own the 529 plan, then it is not listed as an asset. So grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, someone else owns it. They're the owner and the student is the beneficiary. The 529 plan is not listed. But again, it is also, if it's owned by the parent, it is listed as an asset of the parent, not the student. Assets that are not included are the family's primary residence, life insurance plans, and traditional retirement plans. So PERS, STRS, 401k, pension funds, annuities, non-education IRAs, and KEOG plans. Before signing the FAFSA, the student will be asked to answer a few survey questions. The student may decline to answer the questions, and if they are choosing to decline, they must click the decline to answer button. They cannot bypass this section without providing an answer, but it is okay to decline to answer. These questions do not affect a student's financial aid eligibility. They are strictly for survey purposes, and schools do not see the responses as the student has answered them. Now you will be at the agreement of the terms. So for both the student and parent, they are presented with the terms of submitting a FAFSA application. So the student will read their rights and responsibilities essentially, and they will click the box saying that they agree to the terms. And the parent will do the same thing in the parent section. And then they will each provide their FSA ID. So if the student logged in with their FSA ID, they will not have to enter that username and password again. They simply can click sign the FAFSA with my FSA ID. And then the parent signature will click that they will provide an FSA ID. You will select the parent that has the FSA ID and provide the parent's signature by entering that username and password. At this point, there's also an option to view the FAFSA summary information, and we encourage all families to do that. Go and check and make sure that all of the answers that you provided are exactly how you wanted them, that you didn't add an extra 0 to the income, that you didn't transpose numbers, and that everything appears the way that you want it. Once you've confirmed that, then you can click the button that says Submit My FAFSA Now. This will then submit the FAFSA to Federal Student Aid for processing. Once you click the Submit My FAFSA Now, the FAFSA will be locked down for processing for approximately 48 to 72 hours. You cannot go in and make any corrections until the student receives notification that that FAFSA has been processed, and then they may go back in and view it. You will now receive what is called a confirmation page, letting the student know that they have successfully submitted the FAFSA form. It will provide them with an EFC estimate. And if that EFC indicates that the student would be eligible for a federal Pell Grant, it will tell them their estimated Pell Grant amount. And at the very minimum, all students will be provided with information regarding a direct loan estimate. At this time, parents who have more than one student in college at the same time have a one-time option to transfer the FAFSA information from one FAFSA to the other. So for example, you have a student that is currently enrolled in college and has a FAFSA on file. You would want to do their FAFSA first, do the renewal FAFSA. And then when you receive the confirmation page for that student, you click this transfer FAFSA information button here on the confirmation page, and it will open up a new FAFSA application, and it will take all of the parents' information and plug it into that FAFSA form. And then all the student and parent need to do is identify the new student by using their FSA ID, and it will pre-populate the demographic information for the student. You will add the tax information for the student and the asset information, and you're now ready to submit that FAFSA form. So that would speed up the process in doing a FAFSA application for a second or third child. Once you close down that confirmation page, that link is lost, and you will now have to do all of the data entry. Once the student has been notified that their FAFSA has been successfully processed, they may log back into the FAFSA form, and they may view the processed results if they want to. If the student does not need to go in and add any more schools or make any corrections to the FAFSA form, they do not need to go back into the FAFSA application potentially until next year when they do the renewal application. However, if they do need to add another school, or you find that you've made an error and you need to go back in and make a correction, you can log back in and you can click the link that says update schools if all you need to do is add, remove, or change a school or housing plans. If you need to make a correction to other information, you may go here to edit the FAFSA form. Now, keep in mind, you cannot update information that was provided on the FAFSA form. So that asset information, for example, was captured at the time that you submitted the FAFSA form. And if something changed in those asset figures, you cannot go in and update them. They're captured at a point in time. So that is not an updatable field within the FAFSA form. But if you need to go in and make a correction, if an address changes, something changed in this student's housing plans, for example, you would then go in and make a correction. If the student ever needs what is called a student aid report, they would click here and it would provide them with a PDF version of the process results of the FAFSA form. Sometimes scholarship providers will ask a student to provide a copy of the student aid report. You should be cautioned in providing the entire student aid report to an outside source. So when the FAFSA is processed, the results are electronically sent to the schools that the student indicated. So they do not need a copy of this student aid report. But if an outside source is asking for it, you could simply provide them with a copy of the front page that shows that the student's FAFSA was processed, and it will show the calculated expected family contribution. In most cases, that should be all that an outside source, such as a scholarship provider, would need for the student. Again, only make corrections to incorrect data. Do not update data that was accurate at the time of submission. You would want to contact the financial aid office at the school if you have any questions about updating information on the FAFSA form. Now, we do understand that we are in the year 2022 going into 2023. And we're asking families to provide the 21 tax information onto the FAFSA form. And we recognize that that may not be an indicative figure that is related to the family's current financial situation. And so we are allowed or permitted to review what we call special circumstances. And the most common special circumstances that we see are loss of employment after the 21 tax year, or loss of child support. So when you file the FAFSA, you will indicate child support that was received in 2021. However, we know that child support typically ends when a student turns 18 or graduates from high school. So those may be circumstances that you would want to identify to the colleges that you are applying to let them know that you might have these special circumstances and you would like to potentially have the student's FAFSA application reconsidered based on different information. Other examples could be unusual uncovered medical and dental expenses, the death of a parent or a spouse after the FAFSA was submitted, or divorce of parents or spouse, and the student cannot obtain parents' information for the FAFSA form. These conditions cannot be documented on the FAFSA itself. So families would need to submit the FAFSA form listing all 2021 taxable and untaxable income at that time. Then they would reach out to the school's financial aid office and discuss an appeal process. Typically, the colleges have an appeal form where the families would fill out the form, send in a written explanation along with documentation to support their circumstances. The school would review and request any additional information as necessary, and then determine if the circumstances would warrant a reevaluation of the student's FAFSA form. And if so, then the school would recalculate the FAFSA form for the student, indicating that they used their professional judgment, and hopefully then reduce the student's family contribution, hopefully increasing the amount of aid they are eligible for. The decision is final at the school level and cannot be appealed to the Department of Education. So you will start submitting the FAFSA form after October 1st. It will be released to all of the schools that are listed in the school selection section. And then the schools will start to receive those FAFSAs in November and December and start to bring those into their systems and evaluate whether or not additional information is needed. So remember, we talked about if a student is selected for a process called verification, then the school will reach out to the student to let them know that they need this additional information. Typically, it's a verification of income in the form of tax returns and W-2s if the student and parent did not use the data retrieval tool. It could be a verification of the student's household size and the number in college, or an identity and statement of educational purpose, or documentation of high school completion. So those are the common items that a school's financial aid office could reach out to the student to request. You will want to provide that information as quickly as possible so that the school's financial aid office can continue moving forward and preparing a financial aid offer for the student. Once the school determines the financial aid offer, those are usually sent to the student either by email or regular mail, and sometimes could come in the form of an email that directs a student to the school portal to actually see the awards. And I'll talk about that here in just a second. The financial aid offer will include the amount of aid that is awarded from each program. It should explain to the student how and when that aid is dispersed and the terms and condition of the student's aid offer. Now, many schools use what we call a school portal, where the student would have an online access where they could register for classes, view financial aid and billing, among other business needs at the school. Also, schools tend to use a school assigned email account. The student is usually notified about access to the portal and to the school's email account at the time that they are sent an offer of admission to the college. So student applies for admission, they are, or they actually may be notified that their application has been received and that they are now asked to access the school portal and activate the school's email account. So if a student is looking at more than one college or university, they may be asked to activate multiple school email accounts and monitor those until they make a final decision on where they are planning to enroll. Many schools will revert to only using that student's email account to communicate with them. So for example, if a student is selected for verification, they may have already been expected to activate that email account, and the school will email the student to say, you've been selected for a process called verification. Log into our school portal to view the documents that we are requesting for you. So you'll want to be very careful after a student has applied for admission to view the information that's coming from the school's admissions office regarding whether or not an email account has been assigned and whether or not the student needs to review a school portal. Once a student enrolls in college, their college record, academic, and finances become protected under a law called FERPA, the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act. And students would need to give parents and guardians permission to access the information if they choose. So it is very similar to the HIPAA laws, where when a child turns 18, their health records are protected under HIPAA unless they give parent or guardian permission to access that. It is the same thing with the FERPA regulations. So many colleges have a student information release form on their school portal or some way for the student to authorize the school to speak to someone other than the student. So here is an example of a school's student information release, and you can see that the student would need to indicate the name of the person they want to have access to information, create an access code that that person will need to know when they call in to ask information about the student. And then the student can indicate if they want the school to be able to discuss academic information, account information, and or financial aid information. So some students may say, yes, I want my parents to be able to see account information and financial aid information, but I do not want them to be able to see my academic information. In other words, their grades. So we recommend that all students and parents work closely through this process and are communicating all of the information. And that way students, parents can call in to check the status and not be frustrated when the school's financial aid or billing office or academic office is limited in the amount of information that they may share with the parent because they do not have permission. Now, the focus of this presentation has primarily been about the 23-24 FAFSA process. But we want to discuss here for a minute the FAFSA Simplification Act that was passed in December of 2020 that is being phased in throughout the last few years and will be finalized in 24-25 with a significant overhaul of the FAFSA process. So the first one we want to discuss is in 23-24, FSA removed the requirement that all males be registered with Selective Service when they turn 18 in order to be eligible for federal financial aid. Now, the Selective Service registration requirement is still a federal requirement that when males turn 18, they are required to register with the Selective Service. And if a student is attending a state institution, specifically, we can speak about the state of Ohio, the registrar or the records office at the college and university will still be making sure that those males have complied with that requirement. We are required to by the state of Ohio. And how a male will know that they did not successfully comply with that requirement at many schools is they will be assessed out-of-state tuition until they comply with that requirement to register with Selective Service. Other changes that are coming with the FAFSA Simplification Act include changing the EFC that we just spent a lot of time talking about. The expected family contribution will be renamed to the Student Aid Index, or SAI, in 24-25. So in 23-24, it is still EFC. In 24-25, it will be a Student Aid Index. So it really is reflecting more of what that figure is, which is an index that the colleges use to determine how much aid the student is eligible for and from which programs. There will also be a change to who is reported as the parent in the case of a divorce or a separation. The household size will no longer be directly reported by the student and parent, but rather based on the number of people that are included on the tax form for the tax year that is being reported on that FAFSA. They are removing the number in college from the calculation. And they are adding back in the requirement that families that own a family farm or a small business, they will need to include the value of the farm and the small business as an asset on the FAFSA form. And the need analysis process, the way that the FAFSA is calculated, is also having some adjustments to it. So this will be reflected in the different policies and procedures for the schools. So we spent a few minutes talking about that on this presentation because we want students and parents to be aware that what they are experiencing in 23-24 will look a little different going into 24-25. We hope that you have found this presentation to be helpful and understand that you may have questions regarding the FAFSA process. You may reach out to the OASFA Outreach Committee at any time at outreach@owasfa.org.